All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Amanda Goa. I work with the Africa Creatives Alliance, specifically with the community engagement and program development sector. So I'm so glad to have you here as our guests for this webinar. This is the first of its kind. And we specifically wanted this to be tailored towards you, the intermediaries, because we believe that you are the heartbeat of our community. Um, so yes, I do work with the community a lot, and our focus as the ACA is right now we want to focus on our intermediaries. So the reason why we wanted to do this is because we feel like you are in the best position to support entrepreneurs across the continent. And the best way for us to support those entrepreneurs is by supporting you, the intermediaries. So we are very passionate about the work that we're doing, and we are tailoring all our interventions to make sure that we can be able to support you so that you can thrive in this creative economy space. So Rita is going to speak more about the Alliance and its pillars, but just to give you a brief overview of what they are, right now we have 4 pillars that we are focusing our interventions on. The first pillar being ecosystem convening, where we want to get the hubs to get to know each other and network and to be able to build those strong connections. The second pillar that she'll be talking about will be capacity building and education, because we feel like we would like to have more skilled intermediaries that are supporting the entrepreneurs across the continent. The third pillar that I think is very important, and Johanna will be speaking more to this, is the evidence-based policy and advocacy. And we believe that with the right data, the policymakers that are in key positions will be able to support the interventions that we are building out as the Alliance. And finally, investment facilitation and infrastructure is the last pillar that Rita will be speaking about. And this is basically to make sure we channel the right investments towards you, the intermediary, to support your initiatives as you support the entrepreneurs across the continent. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. And like I said, we want to hear from you today. We want you to engage as much as you can. And we look forward to the conversations that we're going to start, and we're going to continue to build after this webinar. So just a couple of house rules that I wanted us to go through so that we can facilitate a smooth engagement throughout the course of the webinar. I would kindly like all of you to put your name and entity that you're affiliated with in your name box. In terms of keeping yourself muted, I would like for you all to do so unless you are actively speaking or engaging with the other intermediaries during this webinar. Also, if you have any echo or interference in the background, please adjust your settings accordingly. When you are speaking, I would kindly like to ask you to put your videos on so that we can see you to facilitate better engagement with us. So we will also be using what they call a Mentimeter throughout this webinar. And basically, at the appropriate time, I'll be sharing the link with you in the chat. And this link will give you access to the Mentimeter, where you can be able to share your responses to the questions that I will be asking you throughout the webinar. This is just to enhance engagement as well. We shall be sharing these responses with you during the course of the webinar and also at the end of the webinar, depending on how we progress with time. So I'll be sharing those instructions with you. In case you have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the chat. We'll also have a Q&A session after Johanna presents her findings of the study that we published last year. And if you would need to contribute, kindly raise your hand, and I'll be able to select you so that you can be able to say your question. We'll also be having breakout sessions during the course of the webinar. This is a very important segment for us because it will be the chance for you to have a facilitated discussion. During registration, I know some of you selected your topics that you're most interested in. So this will be a chance for you to share your perspectives and your views so that we can better understand how the Alliance can be able to help you moving forward. We'll also be having some follow-up at the end of the webinar. I'll be reaching out to you in order to understand what we did right, what we did wrong, and basically how to make this an ongoing conversation, as we intend to have more webinars like this in the future. So please note that the priority today is for the intermediaries. So all the representatives of the intermediaries, we would like for you to take first dibs with contributing. But of course, we have some representatives from other sectors that we thought would be great to be in the room and to take part in these conversations. So thank you again so much for joining us and for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be able to interact with us today. Without further ado, I wanted us to go over the just the agenda to make sure that we understand what is to unfold, so there are no surprises there. So after I finish with this session, I'm going to introduce Rita. Rita is the founding director of the ACA, the Africa Creatives Alliance. She's going to share with you a brief overview of what the ACA does, why it was founded, and how we see ourselves better assisting all our intermediaries in the future. Thereafter, we'll have a brief Mentimeter session where we'll be able to ask some of you to respond to the questions that we have in place. Then after that, I will invite our expert on CCIs, Miss Johanna Kuzmin. She'll be able to share with us her insights from the report that we published last year. She is the author of this report, by the way, so she's the best person in the room to be able to give you insight on it. We shall also be having a Q&A session that will be brief, but in case you have any questions in regards to what Johanna says, that will be a good time for you to voice them. We'll have another Mentimeter break after that, and then we shall get into our breakout sessions after that. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all our facilitators for the breakout sessions. We do have some of them already present. Mr. Gatige Waimana. He is a youth leader in Kenya. He's done a lot of initiatives with UNESCO and UNDP, and he's just very passionate about giving the youth a voice. So he's going to be facilitating the discussion on trade today. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Getige. And he's also a convener for the AFCFTA Caravan. So he's going to be shedding some light on that topic. So thank you so much, Mr. Getige, for your time. The other breakout sessions, we'll have one on entrepreneurial life cycle and ecosystem. That will be facilitated by Mr. Sydney Scott Sam. He is the CEO of Workspace Global and Open Space Global. I believe he's been in the entrepreneurial space for about 14 years, if I'm not mistaken. And he's done really great things on the continent. So I can't wait to hear more about how he can be able to shed some more light on that conversation. And we'll have another breakout session on governance and business models for intermediaries, which will be facilitated by myself, Amanda Gore. And we'll also have another session on investment, which will be facilitated by Mr. Vite Oduneye. He is what I call the investment guru, and he also serves as the board, or he serves on the board of directors for the ACA. So we're so glad that he could join us today. He's launched a venture capital firm, and he is very passionate about investments, especially for startups on the continent. So thank you so much for your time, Vite. And finally, we'll also have a breakout session on IP networks and data and information. This will be facilitated by Johanna. And like I said, she's a CCI expert, and she's going to be leading that discussion. So we'll have a brief session after the breakout sessions where we'll come together and basically just share what are the key takeaways that we've discussed during the breakout sessions. So again, we'll keep this brief because we don't have a lot of time. And I know we have a lot of to share. So we'll definitely be picking up these conversations as we move forward. And we also want to give you some practical information about the ACA. Again, this is our chance for us to get to know each other. So I know some of you may have some questions about how you can be integrated into the alliance and what's next as well. What other initiatives and events do we have upcoming? So Rita and I will be sharing more about that. And finally, we'll close with a Mentimeter question just to get some final responses from you all. So thank you so much for your time again. So without wasting any more time, I just want to make sure that we proceed. So Can I please invite Ms. Rita to take us into the welcome remarks for the Africa Creatives Alliance? Over to you, Rita.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. Good morning from Nairobi. I'm actually in Nairobi. I arrived last night, so if there's anyone in Nairobi, I'd love to connect while I'm here, specifically here to attend the Sunculp Africa Summit. So anyone who's also joining the summit, I'd love to connect. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today. I think for the Alliance, this has been important in ensuring that in how we work and how we build interventions and how we engage with our community, with stakeholders, that it's very evidence-based, but also takes in a really Pan-African context in understanding the local, national contexts across the continent. The Alliance itself, I sometimes say it's also a startup of sorts, because we activated the launch phase of the Alliance with the AU in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia last year, September. And for us, that launch was really a validation of the fact that there are key players within the space, but also community members that have a really firm belief in the need for the CCIs, the cultural and creative industries, to be recognized as not just cosmetic industry, but more so as a viable economic player in terms of the contribution to GDP, in terms of being an economic engine that can fuel progress across the continent, from job creation to innovation, entrepreneurship, and so forth. We come from a background really of being very entrenched in the ecosystem, in the innovation ecosystem, in the startup ecosystem, in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. We were part of the formation and the design, really, out of the Innovation Village, the need for a solution for the CCIs, and that's how we designed Motive, which is East Africa's largest makerspace and creative hub. So if you're ever in Kampala, please come and visit us. And we were very clear from the start that we wanted to be intentional in leveraging the lack of data that exists within the sector, and understanding how can we begin to bring this data together to begin to make an evidence-based case for the sector to those that need to listen, whether it comes to policy reform, whether it comes to a recognition of the sector, to the right enabling and support systems that push the sector forward, particularly the young people that play within the sector. We know that Africa is a young continent, and one of our most pressing challenges is unemployment. And the creative economy can possibly be one of the answers to that, or one of the solutions to that great pain point. And so one of the first things we went about, one of the first interventions we followed was our reports, and it's the Moonshot 8 report. We've got two versions of the study, which is the stakeholder version, specifically for policymakers, for development partners, for any organizational institutions that are building the enabling environment around the creative entrepreneurs and the professionals and so forth. So this version we already held a dissemination of, and we will continue to disseminate this version because we believe that it is critical in informing policies and intervention areas and so forth. But also, another version that we have is a public version that's available on our website. And this specifically speaks to our advocacy for the community. And when I say the community, the way that the ACA is structured is that we're building a Pan-African network of intermediaries, because we strongly believe that the intermediaries are crucial in pushing out viable enterprises, viable businesses. They are the pathway to the entrepreneurs to the professionals to, the various people that are playing within this space, and the ones that will be birthed out of it, to see the unicorns that come out of the industry. But if we do not have the right support structures, and if we are to scale the alliance, it's important that we take a scaled approach. And that scaled approach is through a Pan-African network of the hubs, the pre-incubators, the incubators, the accelerators, who represent an organized group or community of the creatives that we hope to reach. And that's what the model looks like. We're really in what I would say a lot within the exploratory phase, even though we've seen a lot of support, we've seen a lot of interest. But it's important that we're able to consider the various voices that speak to this space, and to not design interventions that are not able to be contextualized to the reality on ground, right? If you live in Africa, if your operations are within Africa, you understand the importance of interventions being very locally relevant, being very alive to the local realities. And so for us, our community is really the heartbeat of what we hope to achieve. And building this Pan-African network is building one voice that will really push for the recognition of the sector, and also for the integration of this sector into key decision making spaces. Because in so many international tools that we speak of, I know the AFCFTA will come up at some point in this conversation. Why is the sector not coming out strongly? What do these international tools mean for a creative in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Uganda, in South Africa, and so forth? And unless we begin to mobilize and to prepare ourselves, then we continue seeing these isolated interventions that are not able to grow at scale. So that's really what the Alliance speaks to, if I'm to be as informal as possible. Part of what we're doing, I've already mentioned the studies, which Johanna, who is the author of the studies, will speak to, but we also have key interventions where we're looking at, number one, mapping what does the sector look like across the continent? Who are the key players? Who is doing what? How do we build a data bank that is relevant for anyone that wants to play in this space, that wants to this space? So that really speaks to our data project. We also have an investment project in the pipeline, and in our conversations with some key players, especially those within the investment and financing space, what came out a lot was, we don't see any bankable projects. We do not see bankable enterprises. We don't see bankable intermediaries that we can work with. So our response to that was, how do we create an investment safe label for these players, where they're able to channel investments through the intermediaries to reach the creatives? And that's what our thinking is going towards. We also have the instruments such as AFCFTA, which we've seen is one that our community needs to know, needs to understand, and needs to leverage. So how do we make the case for it? How do we build capacity within the community to leverage such a tool? And then our gathering. We're also planning our annual gathering, and this year specifically, we're going to Kigali, Rwanda. We'd love for you to join us. Of course, information on this gathering will come out soon, but this is our way really of convening, I don't want to say just the ecosystem, but of convening various sectors together to begin to show that there is a force that exists behind the creative economy. And Kigali will be our first destination. Of course, we were in Addis last year. This year we'll be in Kigali. And next year, probably some other African city. But the idea behind all of these activities, all of these interventions, is that we're able to take everyone along to continue to mobilize the various countries. So at the end of the day, it's our community that benefits. As a member of the Alliance, we want to bring you the resources, the tools, the partnerships, the expertise, the support that you need to scale, to thrive, to have viable enterprises. So that's what it means to be a community member. We'd love for you to join us. You can go onto our website. There's a sheet or form that you get to fill in to join the community and to follow our journey, because you are part of this journey. It's a really early phase of our journey, and we know that to build a sustainable representation or a sustainable network, it's really going to take a lot of participation from all our ends, in one shared mission. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but that's just a really broad overview. But I'm so happy to see you all here today, and I'd love to connect with each of you and really listen and understand and explore the various ways that we can work together to push this mission forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rita. I'm sure all of you are now you have a kind of an overview on what the ACA is. So thank you so much, Rita, for sharing. Like she said, we do have some resources on the website and would love for you to join us moving forward. So if you have any questions, please feel free. I'll be putting our information in the chat so that you can reach out to either I or Rita or Johanna as well. So next on our agenda, we're going to have a Mentimeter session. Or Johanna, would you like to start your session and then I can do the Mentimeter after as more people are joining the webinar?
Sure, I can start.
Okay, great.
I'm just checking with you now that you confirm that do you see my slide?
Yes.
And only the slide?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay,
yes.
Great. Perfect. Well, okay. Good morning, everyone. It's great that you are able to join us today. So I have the pleasure to speak a bit to the study. Of course, I will speak a bit about the study, but it's also about speaking about what essentially is about intermediaries in this space, and also a bit about what we really mean with intermediaries and how we would like to take this discussion forward today. So I'm a board member of the Alliance, as Amanda said, and I'm a member or I'm an author of the Moonshot 8 study. And I think I've also been in contact with a couple of you who are joined here today during the study last year. So the study itself, it's really based on conversations with culture and creative sector professionals, but also, of course, on reviews of publications, reports, and policy documents. And the study is done with a twofold purpose, both to guarantee meaningful action and position for the Alliance in the Pan-African ecosystem, but also then with an assumption that a systemic approach is needed for reaching the potential that the creative economy in Africa can have. And with systemic approach, I mean a structured approach from policy level, but also a structured approach from a meso level, so where intermediaries are situated. So as already been said, the webinar in December focused on macro level key stakeholders being able to activate policies, governments, and instruments for the systemic change. And today we then talk about this meso level. We discuss about the needs for intermediaries as then creative hubs, maker spaces, incubator accelerators. But we also talk about what can be the role for these type of entities to take, right? In the empowerment of professionals, entrepreneurs, but also in relation to the ecosystem development and its interconnectivity. So talking about this topic about intermediaries, and I think it's quite interesting because as talking to other experts or people working in CCI, I even feel that people who kind of should know a lot about the intermediaries have actually quite a different opinion about what these are. So, I mean, we can talk about public entities, private entities, we can talk about NGOs and companies, individuals or entities. And in the widest sense, these can be organizations or individuals that facilitate the connection between creators and audiences, markets, or other stakeholders, may it be on providing investment, access to co-development, production, promotion, marketing, publishing, distribution, or aggregation. And we can talk about specific areas. We can talk about the digital creative economy, arts and design-based cross-innovation, which is a field of mine that I've been focusing a lot on, or we can talk about even payment platforms, so it's really quite diverse. But what we then talk about in the context of the alliance are really these intermediaries as the creative hubs, the maker spaces, the pre-incubators, incubators, and accelerators, assisting, supporting professionals and entrepreneurs in the CCIs at large with defining business models, services, and goods, empowering them with a diverse sets of skills related to this, and give also access to equipment and infrastructure needed for creating goods and services. So the definition of culture and creative sectors used in the study is then really large. It has been really embracing it from the largest sense, embracing core arts, culture, heritage, crafts, film, video, design, fashion, TV and radio, advertising, and the concepts such as creator economy, digital creative economy, culture and creative economy. So we mean intermediaries as the ones mentioned, addressing all of these subsectors. So we will get back to intermediaries and really the importance of intermediaries and the role in the African creative economy development. So just to remind ourselves, why does the creative economy matter now in Africa? Beyond the fact, of course, that we want to live meaningful and financially rewarding careers and life, right? So the Moonshot 8 refers to the moonshots and also the goals and aspiration of the Agenda 2063. The Africa we want. The moonshot is particularly chosen because it makes explicit the complexity of getting there, but it's of course also a call for being serious and intentional with integrating culture and creative industries in development and growth strategies. So looking at Africa Vision 2063, culture, creativity, and the CCIs are in so many aspects interlinked with its objectives, as well as they are vehicles for reaching objectives that this agenda aspires to. And we have heard a discourse about the creative economy for the last years, and especially in relation to Africa. If we look at statistics as from UNCTAD, UN Conference on Trade and Development, it shows that creative economy is one of the fastest growing sectors. They have tracked the creative goods and services for more than 20 years now, and they consistently find that the growth rate of creative economy exports outpaces other industries. And also as an individual expert, I continue all the time discovering the opportunity in the creative economy, even when then seeing areas as IP and copyright and informal economy, because of the tremendous drains that these areas still represent, and in most cases are not addressed properly and dealt properly with. But what if they could be? So the study looked at the CCIs from a large systemic perspective. In Africa, the clock is ticking from a time and growth perspective. How can culture and creativity be activated to respond to Africa's young and growing population? With the growth of inhabitants and youth by 2050, and young people will constitute half of the 2 billion working age population at 2063. By 2050, sub-Saharan Africa is estimated to need over 72 million new jobs. So will entrepreneurship solve this challenge? And of course, we do really believe with the Alliance that it can contribute a lot in this challenge, right? According to African Development Bank, SMEs in Africa represent 95% of all companies and generate 80% of jobs across the continent, making them a powerful conduit, not only for addressing economic growth, but also for tackling youth unemployment. And another study highlights that what we probably all have in mind, that a big part of the creative businesses are very small, 47% between 1 and 5 employees in DRC and 80% are between 1 and 10 on employees in Kenya, for example. But yet it can be seen that CCI and small business sectors are not contributing enough to GDP in countries across Africa. And this is, I think, been a lot because of the interconnectedness and the lack of interconnectedness and the lack of conducive ecosystems. So if governments then are slow in creating the right policy and regulatory frameworks and provide state funding, public-private partnerships that develop ecosystem efficiently, what can then be done from a meso level by intermediaries? Intermediaries are not yet enough in numbers or in efficiency. Intermediaries that can address finance, building skills, capacity, IP frameworks, simply creating the access to information. So the gaps in the ecosystem also make it it makes it difficult to leverage opportunities such as the AFCFTA that we also will speak more about. So then beyond, yes?
Sorry to interrupt you. Your slides are a little cut off. I don't know if you had. Yes, now that's better. I think you had zoomed in before, so now we can see your entire slide. Yeah. Sorry for the interruption.
Is it fine? It's still okay? Yeah.
Now it's okay.
Perfect. Great.
Okay. Thank you.
So yes, then. So I mean, beyond the idea of the Pan-African 2063 agenda, why this Pan-African approach? It's because, you know, creative economy, it's built on a very fragile intersection of youth and culture, topics that we can see often, you know, as cosmetics, as also Rita mentioned, in political discourses, but not enough in the growth and development strategies. And entrepreneurship on its end, it's neither enough supported. So that makes this intersection complicated. But, you know, in reality, and I believe that we are all convinced of that here, youth, culture, and creative industries and entrepreneurship is a powerful combination. So this is why it's so crucial to explore and to strengthen the Pan-African solutions. Across the continent, we have many examples and professionals that can influence governments in the right direction. And the orchestration of this collaboration, we believe, is key. And it can also be mentioned that in the study, lack of collaboration within the creative economy sphere and lack of collaboration simply is one of the major challenges for growing efficiently the creative economy. So talking then more about the creative economy cornerstones and tapping into this Pan-African system again. So the creative economy cornerstones are basic elements that are pivotal for culture and creative sectors to function and generate economic output and value. And this is what I have partly looked at during the study, the emergence of these cornerstones. So across the continent, we have various kinds of organizations that are focusing on each and all of these separate areas and topics. And this may be IP, this may be social protection, it may be loans and funds and finance, mobility and market access, education and training, and so forth. And we really need to see more of these creative cornerstones representatives, you know, to see them together, coming together. And I don't think that is only about an opportunity to create that. It is, in my opinion, maybe the only way that we can reach a more focused and collaborative, faster application of what is needed for activating the creative economy, targeting a spread of knowledge and powerful advocacy in many countries in parallel, and not having it isolated in some countries that are far ahead of others, for example. On national levels, I haven't been able to see any examples where the cornerstones or basic conditions for making the CCIs prosperous are in place. But there are good examples from different countries across the continent that we could use for showing what is an ideal setup for activating, you know, creative economy? What would the ideal setup look like? So this would be highly motivating for bringing expertise and examples together in a Pan-African creative economy approach. And we will also get back to that in a couple of minutes. Just a couple of observations from the study in terms of challenges. That many of these challenges identified correspond to or create obstacles for dynamic ecosystem and creative economy cornerstones. So I listed as the major or main challenges: lack of efficient intersectoral governance, lack of data, lack of investment. And these are strongly interlinked or could be seen as root causes to many other challenges that I think the study has in total 29, where we find important areas such as intellectual property, copyright, as well as the informal economy again, and poor working conditions. The Maasai in East Africa, just an example of a misappropriation of culture heritage and culture expression, which is then also a direct example of how creators do not benefit from their own culture expression, but is being exploited instead by other sectors and traders who simply can do what they do because of the lacking laws, enforcement of laws, awareness of good practice, or simply also that we are lack in good incentives bringing them in the right direction. Conclusions from my side, having looked at the emergence of the creative economy across the continent, is that, of course, it's very unequal, with the high concentration of the big four countries, where we can also see, of course, other countries across the continent, that there are policy updates and policy revisions that are done by a high level, also with international agencies as UNESCO. But we can ask in how many contexts these are really anchored in operational intersectoral policies that are really being activated for the creative economy. And here we talk then about, of course, the intersectoral readiness of the governments to actually activate that. So best practices on ecosystem development, interconnectivity, and intersectoral practices are really pivotal. So then we go really briefly just to the data slide, which, it's not surprising when we know about what are the challenges. And I am sure that many of you are fed up of hearing about challenges and more want to speak about solutions. So I think we will go on to those. So again, going back, so we would really love to see a Pan-African Creative Economy Federation before coming to the alliance in the intermediaries as such. The alliance can also play a role in this greater context, in a federation context of created by different players and stakeholders from across the continent, both of Pan-African nature and national nature. So here we see a bit about the different roles that such a federation could have. And I think that what could be interesting to think about in the creation of such a federation is actually the construct of such federation, which will be maybe more important than its actual task, if I will bring that a bit to extremes, because it is all about co-creating with networks, companies and organizations working with different remit and responsibility areas, building on ambassadorship and professionals from other sectors. So together, we can all create, reinforce this development. Okay, so intermediaries are in focus for the Africa Creatives Alliance, right? So this webinar is about how we can strengthen intermediaries in empowering professionals and entrepreneurs, but it is also to see how then, what roles can intermediaries play in this building of the interconnected ecosystems. And we really believe in this because we have seen the importance of entrepreneurs for the economy, right? We have not seen anything like this, what we are doing being tried out really before, even though there are constellations of regional incubators and so on. Intermediaries can partly bridge a gap of missing and lacking education and training on business models and strategy, as well as refining goods and services in question. And they are important in helping building entrepreneurs' networks, and they can help reinforce MSMEs in competition, in the lack of infrastructure, in organizational, financial, and administrative operations. So incubator-like entities know the entrepreneurs, understand the complexity of the CCI, hybrid business model, IP, you name it. They can be excellent intermediaries of channeling the investment to MSMEs. So we believe that the well-functioning of extensive intermediary Pan-African network can be catalytic to the African creative economy. So the complexity when we talk about the intermediaries is, of course, that we are embracing entities of different characteristics. So we need to understand the characteristics and activities of existing pre-incubators, incubators, and all of these entities that we are talking about. And often these models we have been able to see are blurred. Our intention is also to drive this dialogue and these definitions more forward. So our interlocutor, the investors, for example, know and understand who they are actually talking to. So this is also why the survey that ACA launched is so important, that we really would urge you to answer, because this will help us understand and help us help. So you can find this in 3 languages on the ACA website. We would really, really be happy if you could have a look at that and if you can spread that on your sites. So we have been in the process of identifying and liaising with intermediaries. We have identified about 90. Hopefully, of course, the number will increase. But just to put that number in perspective, more than 1,000 tech hubs were identified by the International Trade Center across Africa. I think that was in 2023. And an International Trade Center report also noted that tech hubs are network and relationship facilitators, building business enabling environments, as well as serve as an intermediary function in terms of legal, financial, and skills issues. So the same characteristic can or could be, of course, be seen in many creative hubs or CCI incubators. In traditional industry, business, and tech sectors, it's common to see incubators that have equity-based business models. We have not been able to identify such an CCI incubator yet. During the study, we have seen mainly 2 kinds of business model being identified: government financed, publicly owned models, and then on the other hand, entities having a diverse revenue stream of potentially state contribution, but mainly private, such as private sector, service revenue, corporate partnerships, service fees, such as from coaching, training, access to infrastructure, venue rentals, and then also from education, training, and consultancy services. So instead of leaving you with answers, I would like to leave us all with some questions and just some points to have in mind today and also for the coming times. What is the importance then of defining what CCI incubators or wider the range of intermediaries we mentioned, what they are? What is the standard or standards for these practices? How could these standards be more recognized? How can we work further on building trust on those who can bring us investment? What are the ideal characteristics for an incubator channeling funds to entrepreneurs and startups? It's also then interesting to look at what roles intermediaries can play in building the interconnected ecosystems. So how can we work on building this national level framework in relation to AFCFTA? As we know, there is a lot of high hopes, but what do we need to do on national and regional contexts to make these contexts embrace and integrate the CCIs and vice versa? The African Union Startup Model Law Framework, it is noted that in 2023, only 15 African countries had passed startup bills, and one of them was Tunisia. And then when the bill was launched, investment grew by 31% between 2017 and 2021. How can we engage in those frameworks related to ecosystems, also embracing CCIs? We can also talk about the national level frameworks of IP, entrepreneurial life cycle support and business ecosystems that we will talk about. We can talk about building the sophistication in governance and business models incubators, and also then of the plugging into a wider ecosystem on national and Pan-African levels. And building on the needed access to information. So then what is the flow needed between public administrations, and what can be the role of intermediaries then to get that out to the professionals and to the entrepreneurs. So again, as much as we architect the alliance to support intermediaries, it's also just as much about how we could together contribute to building the frameworks that we need and the interconnected ecosystems. And hopefully that is also useful for you in your roles and your value propositions in your national ecosystems and in your countries. So thank you so much for having listened to all of this. And over to you, Amanda. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Johanna. Thank you so much for your insights. Like Rita has mentioned, and Johanna as well, that the report, the public version of it, is available on the website. Simply head over there and you can be able to access it. I think it should be in the Insights, under the Insights tab. So whatever Johanna talked about will definitely be there in a summarized version. And like Rita mentioned, we're continuing to disseminate this key information to some of the policymakers across the continent, because we need them to be able to understand the challenges that Johanna has voiced in terms of lack of data, lack of investment, both on a public and private front. So we need to be able to partner with the right voices in order to be able to facilitate the interventions that we would like to build. However, like she said, those are not the only challenges. I'm sure that some of you intermediaries or the representatives of the intermediaries that we have here are also experiencing your own challenges that we might not have covered in the report. So this is an opportunity or a platform for you to start voicing those and to be able to get the audience that you need to address those issues in the future. So I just wanted to make a quick update that due to the numbers that we have, we are kind of trying to pivot around the breakout room sessions. We are concerned that some of the rooms might not have any participation. So because of that, we would like to change the format a bit. We're going to just ask each facilitator to share on the different breakout session in terms of the questions that they would like to prompt to the intermediaries that we have present. And like I said, this is the beginning of many more conversations to come. So depending on what kind of interaction that we get here, we can be able to follow it up in the near future. So I hope the facilitators that are present are okay with that new change. We just want to make sure that we are utilizing our time the best way that we can. So I had also posted something in our chat to do with the Mentimeter questions. I hope all of you have received that link. It basically takes you directly to the Mentimeter presentation. And these are just a couple of questions that we wanted to engage you with, just to get your thoughts and your perspectives on the CCI industry. So I hope everybody has the link. I'm going to share my screen and share the presentation. And I'm just going to ask you to answer the question. And we can discuss it as we move forward, and also as part of the follow-up that I will be doing later on. So just give me 1 second. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Okay, great. So the first question that I would like to ask is, should CCI startups join agnostic incubators or the ones specializing in CCIs? So yeah, feel free to leave your responses. I'll give us about a minute. Yeah. Okay, so I think the minute is up. We do have a couple of interesting responses. I think it's mixed. There are a couple of people who said yes, you should join specialized incubators in the CCI field. Others said there's value in connecting with both for the networking benefits and cross-learning factors that are important for growth. That's an interesting response. Let's see what else. So someone else mentioned that some startups can benefit from both, starting with a specialized incubator to gain industry knowledge before joining an agnostic one for scaling strategies. Wow, impressive. Okay, another interesting response here is CCI specialized incubators offer industry-specific expertise, access to specialized infrastructure, targeted funding opportunities, and tailored mentorship. So this person is saying yes to specialized incubators. Let's see. Okay, so I think that about sums it all for those responses. Let's move on to the next question. So is it important to have distinct definitions between creative hubs, incubators, maker spaces, and accelerators? And why is this distinct definition between those entities important? I'll give you all just a minute to submit your responses. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm just going to read out all the responses I have so far. Oh, wow, some more have come in. Okay, so someone said that there should be no distinct definitions. A creative hub should be able to incubate and accelerate and do everything for creatives, especially for African creatives. That's interesting. Someone else said distinct definitions are important as each of these spaces serve different purposes. The blurred lines are often a response to lack of funding, organizations broadening scope to be more eligible for funding. Okay, interesting. Depends on who is using the definition. On a macro level, no. It's important to view them all based on their collective contribution to one industry goal. On a micro level, it's more nuanced. All right. And someone else said, yes, it is quite crucial to have clear and distinct definitions as their objectives and scope might differ. And someone else says, for a yes as well, it is important to have distinct definitions because while they often overlap in function and purpose, each serves a unique role in supporting innovation and entrepreneurship. Yeah, I think definitely the session on entrepreneurial life cycle is going to touch more about that. Um, Someone else said there should be no distinction between them, since that would lead to breakdown of information. Interesting. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and do one last question before we get into um, the breakout sessions. So I think the breakout sessions are going to be following the same format of them trying to be a bit more interactive and people leaving their responses. So please keep the same energy. If you have any responses to share or any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to raise your hand or leave a question in the chat, and I'll be able to read it. So for the questions, it would also be important if you're specific, if you're asking to a specific facilitator, or if you're asking to the general audience. So let's do one last question. How many CCI intermediaries, creative hubs, pre-incubators, incubators, accelerators, and so forth, do you think exist across Africa? I'm not even sure I know the right answer to this, but yeah, just let us know what you think. Again, this would tell us more about the the challenge that Johanna spoke about, which is, lack of data, because I'm sure that there are some intermediaries that we do not know about. So let us know what you think. I'll just give you all a minute and then we can move on. Okay, so a minute is up. We have about 9 responses. Oh, now the 10. Very interesting ones. I like the one that said no idea. That's a very honest answer, and I'm sure a lot of us share the same sentiments. Someone else asked, do we actually have this data? That's a very good question, and a question that I think as the Alliance we're trying to answer with one of our initiatives, which is creating a digital map of the creative industry. where we intend to map out all the existing intermediaries, especially in the different regions. And yeah, definitely we will need a lot of support with that. So we shall be sharing our information, and maybe it's also a chance for us to collaborate if you do want to be a part of that initiative. So someone else said estimates suggest that there are over 500 creative hubs, 200 plus incubators and accelerators, and 100 plus maker spaces, with major concentrations in Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, and Ghana. That's a very, very good answer. Sounds very accurate, actually. So someone else said 100-ish. Other people are saying a dozen-ish. I have two answers that said a dozen-ish. Someone else said should be in the thousands, 50 to 100. And then final answer is less than 10. So yeah, that's an interesting response. And of course, we'll be sharing the information that we have with you once we continue to map out the intermediaries that do exist. So thank you so much for participating. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And so now we want to get into the breakout sessions. Like I said, we've changed the format of these to make sure that all the sessions are represented somewhat equally. So the first facilitated session I would like to introduce is about trade. This will be facilitated by Mr. Gatige Wamania. So I hope I pronounced that right. He's the convener of the Kazani AFCFTA Caravan. And like I said, he's a visionary based in Kenya, and he's done some great work there. So over to you, Mr. Gatige. I hope you, yeah, I think you're still on. So yeah, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Very well. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you who have presented before me. And mine, I would actually not call it a presentation. I'll just call it as a sharing. So my name is Maina, and I'm privileged to be the convener of the AFCFTA Kazini Caravan, which is an awareness campaign that targets young people and basically young people across Africa. So what we do is we visit, most of the youth-dominated areas. And when I say youth-dominated areas, could be cultural centers, it could be schools, universities, and even high schools. So we try and just pose just random questions about the African Continental Free Trade Area, because we are passionate about this framework, and we believe that it is a framework that needs to be understood by we, the young people, because we have the free trade area, which have been given to us by our forefathers. So the assignment that we have is to propel it by breathing life into it. So we move across Africa by road, from one country to the other, and try to just randomly understand the AFCFTA in a very simplified way. And the main objective is to call upon each and every young person across Africa to play a part in making the AFCFTA workable. Having said that, I don't know how many of us are familiar with the AFCFTA. I can just give a small brief about it. So the African Continental Free Trade Area is a framework that is a fairly new framework that seeks to consolidate the African market into one. All the 55 African countries consolidate that market so that we don't have some sort of barriers of movement or barriers in terms of tariffs to trade with one another. So the over 1.2 billion of us, we Africans, that's the population of Africa, that we should make this continent a consolidated continent that facilitates the communication and the interaction of all of us, so that we can have one zone, complete one zone that I, as an African, I can, easily move from Nairobi, Kenya here to any part of Africa without a lot of hassles. And why is that important? It is important because the moment you remove restrictions of people moving, that means that we'll be able to at least have that ease of interaction, regardless of the place where anyone is, regardless the sector that you operate in, and regardless the kind of work you do. So we are so passionate about that, and the network that I had, rather that campaign that I had, I have a number of young people who are devoted to it, just voluntarily from universities here in Kenya and from the creative space. So my role in this forum, because I don't want to take a lot of time, I know there are a couple of other presentations behind me, is to just speak about what is the place of this, the CCIs in the implementation of the AFCFTA. I want to just refer to a statement that was made earlier, actually in the report, by our very esteemed, very important point that CCIs, the cultural and creative industries, are very pivotal and central contributor to achieving the Agenda 2063. Agenda 2063 is our blueprint as Africa, where we want Africa, where we envision Africa to be by the year 2063. Year 2063 could be about 40 or so years away, but around should be around 20-something years away. But if we don't make that step today, that means that we could be, we cannot make any strides towards making Africa making Africa what we want. And therefore, I believe that the CCIs have a very critical role, because CCIs, and when I say CCIs, I mean all of us, those who are in trade in services, trade in goods. We have a very strong possibility and strong potential to influence government in the formulation of policies. And I'm just quoting what has been stated before. Therefore, when we come to the implementation of the AFCFTA, because we are at the implementation phase, the CCIs play a critical role in ensuring that the AFCFTA is domesticated from the very high level to the grassroots of our places. And when I say grassroots, I mean where each one of us practices. So if you practice from a given space, say in a cultural place, or in whatever place that you undertake your trade, that means that it is required of you to at least find some space, or find a way that you could breathe life into the AFCFTA. And when I refer to what the ACA is doing, the Africa Creative Alliance, looking forward to try to see where they can capacity build the creatives to, or rather the creative hubs, the co-creative hubs, to capacity build their entrepreneurs to impact ourselves in one way or the other. So personally, I want to believe that the CCIs are not just CCIs in a given grouping, but it is the CCIs in a given grouping that needs to breathe life into the AFCFTA. And maybe what I would wish to actually refer to is one of the questions that have been asked within or was to be posed within this session is, how does our entity or your entity currently work on trade and AFCFTA? Or what kind of resource do you provide, and how do you assist entrepreneurs in identifying and accessing international markets for their products or services, so that we can have that conversation on how the ACA can be able to provide you with that. And I think maybe I could stop at that point, just asking our very esteemed co-creation hubs within, with the work that you do, how do you think the ACA can be able to capacity build you so that you can be able to again be meaningful to the networks that you represent or the entrepreneurs that you work with. So I wish to possibly just pause it there, and we could possibly continue the conversation moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's actually a great place to stop, because I had wanted to merge this with the Mentimeter feature that we were using. So that's the question I had posed to everybody. I'm just about to share my screen. That way, maybe people can start sharing their responses. And Mr. Gatige, maybe you can lead us through answering some of them. So let me share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah, so the first question is, now we, the attendees of this very important meeting, how do you think what does your entity currently work on, trade and AFCFT, or what kind of resources do you provide, and how do you assist entrepreneurs in identifying, is the question really complete?
Oh, sorry. Yes, let me just complete it. 1 second. So that's in accessing. Sorry, unfortunately, the word count was reached. So that's why the question couldn't be completed. Um, but if you don't mind, I'm just going to reshare my screen. I kind of cut it short, so maybe people can answer the first segment of it.
I'm also trying to trace the question on my side. I think I can see it.
Okay. So I've cut this short to how does your entity currently work on trade and AFCFTA / what kind of resources do you provide? Maybe a follow-up to that could be, how do you assist entrepreneurs in identifying and accessing international markets for their products or services? So is it okay if we cut this short for now, Mr. Katige?
I think it's very elaborate. So it's just simply saying how you work on trade or the AFCFTA. It's trade stroke the AFCFTA, or how does it work on business? Okay, normally I say that the word trade can be used interchangeably with the word business. So how does the entity currently work on business under the AFCFTA? What kind of resources do you provide? So that now the next question can be, we can refer to the ACA. So we could participate in the Mentimeter very well. I see the first response says that expertise France, French Technical International Cooperation Agency. We have a project promoting the private sector development in Ghana, and then especially in CCI, with quite a numerous network. Interesting. So I already see a lot of, I see an element of cooperation from one entity in one country and the other, which the AFCFT actually calls upon us to do. An entity in east or west side of Africa cooperating with the other, with an entity in the other side of the continent, so that we can be able to have that cooperation amongst ourselves. Remember something our good lady Johanna again said, that we need a systemic approach, or a structured approach to harness the potential of CCIs. And this one can only be achieved through cooperation between our CCIs. An earlier question was also posed on whether we need to have a distinct role on the same. And I could see, of course, varied responses. And indeed, whether the definition is the same or different, I think it's important that we all collaborate in one way or the other. Please, let's participate in the responses, please. I only see one response. Is there any other response? Oh, yeah, good. Someone in Morocco says we are managing Kawali switchover, still mentorship, training programs, networking, opportunities, and grants. Wonderful. And I believe someone would find this to be an important entity to collaborate with, perhaps from maybe the southern part of Africa, and that will be breathing life into the AFCFTA. Maybe we could see whether we can have us one more response, then we can move to the next question.
Okay. I was also thinking this is also a chance for you to engage the intermediaries with the question about how ACA can support them in this endeavor. So they can also leave that response here as well, just so that we are mindful of time.
Do we have that question? Maybe so that I don't ask and then we have it later. Do you have that question? Maybe you could. Okay.
So
Very
we have
well.
it here. How would you mostly
Yeah.
like to see ACA support you and other intermediaries? This was more general, so we had not tailored it to AFCFTA or trade, but I guess the intermediaries can leave their responses here and make them more specific if that works for them.
Very well. And ACA, it's in this sense means the Africa Creative Alliance. How do you think it could support you? Maybe the entity in Morocco and the entity in Ghana. How do you think the ACA could support you and other intermediaries to, to help you enhance your capacity or your outreach to the people you serve? And that will help the ACA to also see how best to also enhance the capacity or their approach, especially from the main pillars that they have. Could we have our responses, please? Well, we have our first response. They say, I would like to partner with ACA to map out CCI hubs as well as grasp CCI stakeholders' needs, especially in fostering partnership with academia and policymakers. Interesting. So I believe you are recording it somewhere, Amanda. It's a very important response.
Yes, absolutely. And we will also be sharing some of these responses this will be part of our follow-up because we would like to build more webinars based on some of these conversations. So yeah, feel free, please leave as many responses as you'd like, and we will definitely be in touch.
Wonderful. And also just to mention that this is in the pipeline. Of course, I think I had been informed by Johanna that there are upcoming workshops for capacity building on the AFCFTA on how the CCIs can strategically place themselves for the uptake of AFCFTA opportunities. And that's to mean that to enhance our capacity, that particular part of Africa that you may want to reach out or to collaborate with an entity as a CCI and you've not been able to, maybe those particular workshops or outreaches will enable you to do that. So that's something to look forward to. I see there's a second response. Okay.
In the interest of time, we just wanted to make sure that we can move on to the next session. But like I
Very
said,
well.
this is an ongoing conversation. So we will definitely be picking this up so that we can continue to build and to partner and collaborate on further initiatives. So I'd like to move on to our next session. Thank you so much, Mr. Katige, for your time. Thank you so much for your input. And I'm sure that people have understood a bit more how AFCFTA works in regards to trade and how it can support the creative economy.
Thank
So
you.
the next session, I would like to introduce Mr. Sydney Sam. Like I said earlier, he's an entrepreneur in the space. He's had about 14 years experience, and he's going to be leading us on the topic about entrepreneur life cycle. I think at this point, we would just like to make sure we keep the sessions as brief as possible and to have as much interaction from our intermediaries. So I'll be using the same format. I'll be sharing a question in the Mentimeter feature that will allow people to ask. And of course, we want them to also understand how the ACA can best help them. So over to you, Mr. Sydney Sam.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I lead a tech platform that is connecting the world to Africa's digital workforce or design workforce. So I myself, I'm an entrepreneur that has benefited a lot from the intermediaries in the space. I've been incubated. I have spent time in co-working spaces and in different industry players to be able to get to where I am. Now, I have a few questions. Initially, this was designed as a roundtable style session, so I will kind of still take on that approach. Primarily, or first, to ask you a question to get you to think, okay? When do you know you have been successful in terms of the support that you're offering entrepreneurs, and then even further CCI entrepreneurs? So that's something that I want us all to just quickly reflect on, especially because it's quite a tough endeavor for us to, in terms of what we're doing to contribute to the industry. Some of us are incubating, some of us are accelerating, some of us are in the pre-incubation stage. But when do we know we have been successful? And so as we ponder over this, I just want to challenge us to think about the way that our institutions are structured, in the sense of what are we prioritizing? Are we too broad? Are we specific? Where are we collaborating? And where are we handing off to other partners who can continue that journey, especially as we now reflect on when success happens? In my perspective, especially in my many years of industry, I know that you can only say you have properly supported creative entrepreneurs or creative industry entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general when you have supported them to build sustainable businesses so they're able to go on and scale. Now, a lot of the work that has been done in industry focuses a lot on investment readiness, but there are a few other things and areas that I know a lot of us are also focusing on to ensure that we are able to churn out more robust businesses, especially to support those in the CCI industry. So just to open the dialogue a little bit, and if there might be help on the Mentimeter end, that's the first question that I would like to ask you. Are you offering services and support related to pre-incubation, incubation, and acceleration? Let's think about that. Where do you sit in that life cycle? Now, as you reflect on that, you ask yourself, okay, in my work with these three stages, when I'm done with that work, or when I've gotten to the end of that, or when I've created a number of beneficiaries in that cycle, who do I hand them off to? Who continues to support them when they exit? Or for example, let's just assume that they do not stay in your space and they exit your space. Who do you hand them off to? Is there any infrastructure that allows us to find other intermediaries or other collaborators to be able to hand our beneficiaries off to, especially if they're expanding in markets? We just spoke about the ACFTA, and the point is, if the people we're supporting are expanding into different markets, for example, in different African markets, who do you hand them off to as well? Now, as we reflect on that as well, we can then start to look at how our the different intermediaries, agnostic centers, SME networks, innovation centers, programs for cross-border exchange and business enabling environments, directly supporting CCI entrepreneurs and intermediaries. There was a question about where we sit, or there was a question about how much we're contributing specifically to that, and if CCI entrepreneurs should be in specialized institutions or in agnostic institutions. But I mean, I just really want to just open the dialogue up to, how much we are contributing and supporting these folks, and where your institution specifically plays a role in that. Okay. I'm going to ask really quickly to see if Angela, do we already have questions lined up just to start getting some responses in? Okay, I don't believe we do just yet. So we can continue to take that on. So I mean, fundamentally, before we pass on, I pass on the mic to the next facilitator. Like, that's just primarily what I wanted to introduce in this conversation, just to really bring your mind back to the structure of your institution and where and how it plays a role in the entrepreneurship life cycle, where it stands, who you hand off to, where your specializations are, and exactly how you're doing this for CCI entrepreneurs specifically. How do we even understand their life cycle in the same way that we have, support for those in the fintech industry, or in the agri-tech industry, or in the, in just general industries? Like, have we thought about that, and have we been able to build the structures in place for that? And as we reflect on that, I would just encourage that we create more interaction, we ask more questions, especially from the ACA, to be able to support this, and for us to just share some of the things that we're doing to be able to drive this on. But until then, just because this is not so much of a roundtable conversation as we had initially planned, I will want to pass it on to the next facilitator. And I hope this has been useful and insightful to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sydney. Actually, I was waiting for you to conclude, and then I was going to engage the
Oh,
Mentimeter feature.
there we go.
So,
Okay,
so
sweet,
yes, so
sweet,
there
sweet,
is a
sweet.
question there. I'm just going to share my screen, and maybe you can lead the
Lead
discussion
that
with that.
conversation. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So just 1 second. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect. So there are 24 people in the room. So I know that at least we should be able to get at least 3 to 4 responses regarding this question. And I just want to challenge each of you, as we have done this reflection exercise together, to see where we sit. Are you currently offering services, or are you contributing to the success in the pre-incubator space, or in the incubator space, or in the acceleration space? And exactly how do you measure this? So just reflect on where you sit and how you are measuring the success of what you're doing. I know it's a tough question, but I just want to see if we can get 3 responses. I know we have about 20 people in the room, so please do share your thoughts really quickly. Where do you sit in the life cycle? And how do you measure the success of what you're doing? I know it takes a little bit of time to type. Okay. Just a few more seconds to see if we can get a few more responses. Okay, let's do this instead. Okay, there we go. Economic incubators of the incubees. I love that. At Expertise France, we mostly hand out grants to early stage ventures. Okay, so you are in the investment support space. That's really good. Any others? I would actually like to unpack this, the comment about economic indicators. So for example, we can say revenue, we can talk about team growth, the number of jobs that they've created, things like that. Those are all good indicators of the fact that we have been able to build sustainable businesses, but it's something that we really need to track. I know most of us are doing that as well, but specifically in the CCI space, it would be good to apply that lens as well regarding that kind of success. I see there's another comment. So you acknowledge you are in the pre-incubator space, and you measure success by the level of understanding of the involved people. Okay, that's a good one. That's a really, really good point. I also see a point from Rita, the number of youth transition into dignified work. That's a really huge indicator as well, because obviously we're trying to create jobs and economic opportunities for the youth in Africa. Thanks so much. Let's move on to, do we have another question, Angela?
Sorry. No, not at this
Sorry,
time, because
Amanda, sorry, yeah.
no, you're fine. Not at this time. I think we're trying to make sure that everybody can have their session before we conclude. So
Okay,
just move on to mine because
thank
I
you.
had managed to get a question as well up. But thank you so much, Mr. Sidney Sam, for your time. Thank you so much for weighing in. And he's doing some great work with most of his ventures, but especially for me, the Open Space Global really resonated with me because it's a community space for people to get to share their views on different topics, interesting topics, actually. So one of them, of course, that resonates with me is moving back to the continent and the challenges you face as you're going through that transition. So yeah, check it out. So let's move on to the governance and business models. I forgot to put on my camera. So yes, for me, what that means for me is how are the intermediaries structuring themselves in order to gain the most in terms of returns, in terms of how are they supporting the entrepreneurs. So just a couple of things that I wanted to, maybe share with you or build up some more discussion on is, for example, with the governance models, I want to ask some of you if the way that you're structuring them is actually in a way that is building for your success. For example, are you having boards that are stakeholder inclusive with your intermediaries? Are you making sure that they are represented from diverse fields, which is like artists, entrepreneurs, government, and other community leaders who can be able to help you guide your strategies as you're moving forward? And do you have any advisory councils in place? Because I feel like that's important if you want to be able to be held accountable and for regular reviews and updates to align with the sector trends as well. I think that's where an advisory council would really come into play. And with your governance structures, are you making sure that they are collaborative? Are you forming alliances with the local, the regionals, and international partners? Are you promoting shared governance and resource pooling for wider impact as well? And finally, with the policy advocacy, are you engaging in policy making processes to influence supportive cultural and economic policies? That is something that is dear to the Alliance because, of course, we want to be able to support the positive policies that are helping the creative economy thrive across the continent. And when it comes to business models, the main question there is about sustainability, right? Are you making sure that the model that you have in place is able to sustain you as you work with entrepreneurs? So what does that look like for some of you? Are you considering hybrid funding? Are you combining grants, sponsorships, and other revenue generating activities like workshops, events? Are you also making sure that you are also thinking about the social enterprise of things? Because it's one thing to make a profit, but are you actually balancing purpose with that profit? So are you focusing on scalability and sustainability? And in terms of the membership models that you have, this is something that I think we can definitely learn from because, as Rita mentioned, we're still growing. So it's important to understand how you are structuring those membership models. Are you offering tiered memberships for access to resources, for networking and promotion? Are you providing value-added services like mentorship and training and market exposure as well? And also, an important question to ask is, are you leveraging technology in order to broaden the reach and to be able to enhance community engagement like we're doing now? And then what kind of metrics are you looking at? Are you setting clear indicators that are able to measure the social and cultural and economic impacts of your intermediary? And finally, are you leveraging the cultural assets to create tourism experiences that generate revenue? Because a lot of us come from rich cultures that are able to do this. So is this something that you're integrating into your business model or not? And so with that, I don't want to take up too much time, but I wanted to share a question from our Mentimeter section. Let me just make sure it's ready. So, okay. All right, so this is a question for you, and I'll be leading this discussion. I hope you can all see my screen, but so similar to the question that we had in terms of success, how do you measure the success of your intermediary? But in this case, how do you measure the success and sustainability of your business model? I'll give us about a minute, and then I'll be able to read out some of the responses that you've had. Okay, I have one response so far, and that is growth with an exclamation point. And I agree. I mean, I think one of the ways we're trying to also maybe integrate this question into our model as the alliance is by, you know, we want to be able to reach as many intermediaries as possible, right? And the best way for us to do that is by seeing that number growing, right? Like if this webinar we've had maybe 20 people participating, how do we double that number? How do we make sure that we are engaging and interacting with as many intermediaries as possible? Because at the end of the day, when we do have our gathering, the success of that gathering is dependent on how many intermediaries show up and how many are able to take advantage of the benefits that we're offering them and the values and the services that we are striving to provide. So other responses I see by the effectiveness of your operations. That's a good point as well. We measure success and sustainability through financial viability, impact, and ecosystem growth. We track revenue streams, cost efficiency, and business growth of creatives. Wow, that's a great answer. I think that's coming from maybe a hub that has a bit more maybe mileage in the game. So would love to hear more about how you are achieving these kinds of success. Multiple revenue streams so that if one falters, there's another to prop it up. That's very true. Like I'd mentioned, you can't just rely on just membership. You have to also sort of have a hybrid funding system in place. Do you have grants, sponsorships, partnerships, and so forth? So that's something that we'd definitely like to explore with you, and we'll be engaging in conversations to help other intermediaries that are starting up to leverage that information. So thank you so much. Without wasting more time, I'd like to introduce our next facilitator, Mr. Bite. He will be facilitating the session on investment. And yeah, over to you, Mr. Bite.
Thank you very much for that, Amanda. Firstly, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, to be joined with people where we have a similar interest to really, get the best out of the African creatives industry. Now, as Amanda mentioned, my name is Bitel Dine, and I'm the managing partner of ODBA. We're an early stage pre-seed seed African-focused investment company. Over 30 investments, fintech, edtech, health tech, and logistics. But unfortunately, only one in the creatives industry. We like to say things like we invest in improbable stories, we invest in impact, we invest in a narrative. We invest in a founder at the early stage, the grit, the story of the founder. How we differentiate. We receive probably about 500 investment packs a month, and we go through all these packs, and we'll probably make one or two investments based on every 500. Meaning that the story of the founder, bear in mind it's very early stage, so it's not as if they've particularly done enough or they have a product, but the story of the founder is important, very important. It constitutes one of the reasons why we pick one investment over another. Now, let's imagine that and build that up about Africa and the African creative sector. Something we've said forever, which is we don't tell our own stories. Our stories are told by other people. How do we galvanize an industry to attract capital? And this is soft power, one of the greatest powers that any continent, any country could have. Soft power, selling your culture, your heritage, who you are. It opens up significant amounts of GDP. It explains a number of things that we can't see. It enables the world to understand our culture and our values in ways that they haven't before. And this transitions to economic development, resources, and more investment into the sector. And at ACA, and the purpose of this is obviously not for us to speak, but to listen to you. Our goal is to work with as many intermediaries as possible, so we make the sector, we grow the size of the cake. We hear from everybody, and we work together to do things to attract investment. I think I've got arguably, the easiest panel. So I'm not going to talk much. I'm going to go straight into the questions to hear from you, because we all know we require investments. And these investments, what I want us to touch on here is how the intermediaries react with the founders, the creators, how we also react with the funders. What do we need to put in place to ensure that we attract more capital into the sector? Is this, a lot of education on the founders that are building products? Is it a lot of education on the investors that are also investing into the CCI, into CCIs? It's really important that we get to hear from you. As I mentioned, 30 portfolio companies have obviously collected African contemporary art for probably over 25 years, love our music, love everything about us. But if I'm asking myself, I thought of some things this morning, I asked myself some questions this morning before this, and I said, how many albums have I actually bought? How many movies have I paid for? But yet I have watched so many movies, listened to so much music. Yes, I can account for the amount of paintings that I've paid for, but I can't account for all those other things. And these other things are being consumed by the world over. How come we are not making the sort of returns we should be making? How come investment is not flowing into what we would consider one of the most exciting cultures on the continent? And this is what the ACA are hoping to, we're hoping to increase the amount of investment. The plan is to work with as many intermediaries as possible to understand where the difficulties are, so we can come up with plans and structures to ensure that we increase the amount of investments and capital that does come into CCIs. It's important we hear from you. So on that note, Amanda, if it's okay with you, let's dive into some of the questions or the points of conversations where we would love to hear back from everyone. So we'll start with the first one. How do you galvanize your entity to attract capital investment? What do you do internally to be able to attract investment from investors? If we could all kindly attract capital investment by positioning ourselves as a high impact sustainable hub, as a clear value proposition. That's a brilliant answer, because this is again something else which we would discuss in capital for impact and capital for returns for an investment. So that answer is phenomenal. It's something that's we have considered. Any other answers or any other thoughts on what we do internally to attract investment? So positioning ourselves is very important. The capital doesn't come to find us, we go looking for it. So it's identifying what does the capital need to see for us to attract it. How do we position ourselves? How do we look at the founders and startups which we represent? What is the appetite of the impact investors, and what do they need to see? We amplify the work we do so that the potential investors are aware of our value. Very important. Very, very important. People need to know about your wins and how you can assist founders, and that will attract capital. Okay. We've put in place different business models to get enough traction to get investment. Very important. Sustainable business models is a very important part of the CCI sectors. Thank you for this. The answers are coming fast and quick. Internally, we attract investment by strengthening our governance, financial sustainability, and impact measurement. By enhancing your finance management structures. I mean, all these answers are phenomenal. These are the things that I suppose offering high value services. These are the things that we were hoping to hear. So the question is, how do we work together to amplify this? How do we work together as a team to ensure we improve our standards? And for all the organizations already doing this, how do we get in front of investors to let them know all these things that we're doing? Thank you very much for your answers. Let's move on to the second question.
Oh, sorry, Bite. I think in the interest of time, I wanted to introduce our next speaker before we completely run out of time here, because we have one more session, and that is to do with IP networks. And then we can dive into a more general question about how the ACA can now support the intermediaries when it comes to attracting investment and capital. So we'll be sharing that at the end. But thank you so much for that engaging discussion. And I'm sure we'll be picking up on it in the course of the webinar and in the future as well. So
thank you so much. An absolute pleasure addressing you all. Look forward to engaging as we continue. Have a fantastic morning, everyone.
Thank you so much, Bite. Finally, we have our last session, which is going to be facilitated by Johanna. Like I said, she is a culture and creative expert, and she's here to lead us on the IP networks and data and information session. Over to you, Johanna.
Thanks, Amanda. Well, let's focus first on the IP and let's see, maybe we can ask one question also in regards to data, because I feel also that all of these questions really relate to data and how we can help both with data and actions, of course. But okay, so in regards of IP, revenues for the CCI professionals should, of course, also come from IP, goods, services, and intellectual property. And still, of course, as we do know, this is a major challenge linking, impeding investment and linking to AFCFTA and other things. So then behind or related to IP, we have patents and copyrights, for example, copyrights that are related to all kind of artistic work. So actually, I would like to link my first question and also give some thoughts and like some examples. So the first question I would have, like, what best practices do you know in terms of IP, activated IP frameworks in relation to the law, the legislation itself, in terms of enforcement, in terms of incentives, in terms of IP as collateral and monetization? I am wondering if ever we have anyone here from South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. You know, what would be thought about as the credit guarantee scheme in Nigeria. And also, I know that these three countries have advanced quite a lot, but on a bit different parts of the national IP frameworks, valuation of IP, awareness raising around IP to diverse stakeholders in the ecosystem, and also on the collateral. So when you reflect on that, on what best practices you know in terms of IP law enforcement, incentives, collateral, monetization, For example, I can say that I'm not sure that if it's an exact number, because the studies show a bit different numbers, but for example, collective management organizations are the ones that are responsible for licensing, collecting, distributing royalties, and protecting intellectual property rights, and monitoring the usage of creative works and taking legal action also when necessary. And these are existing in at least 23 countries across Africa. And do you have one in your country? Maybe that is just a spontaneous question as well in relation to the best practices, because these are really the kind of organization we need to see in every single African country working on the behalf of the creators. There is a regional directive on private copying levies in the Western African Economic and Monetary Union, meaning that sales of CDs, DVDs, USB drives, smartphones, and tablets, for example, so they already contain a fee going back to the creatives for eventual loss of revenue from private copying by consumers. And I've also heard about the sustainable creativity label that is built and thought of as an incentive for cities, for example, to embrace the ecosystem in the awareness raising, in collection, in awareness of rights, and so forth. So these were a couple of ones that I just wanted to mention. So maybe then over to see whether you would have any good ideas where we are about best practices, if you have any examples that you would like to share with us. Hopefully you have. I would hope that you have. In the meantime, while you're writing, as we are very short of time, I just dig into the second part of this, which you can also, you can also write in the chat of the webinar. Gattige was talking about AFCFTA, and in Rwanda, in Kigali, during the annual gathering of the Alliance, we are preparing a workshop on AFCFTA, and which will definitely not be about understanding the challenges. Well, we need to have understood the challenges when we get there, but that will be really much about building the solutions for the Rwandan, co-create the solutions for the Rwandan context. And I am thinking, how can we do the same in regard to IP, on national levels? What role do you think intermediaries can have in building the right national level IP frameworks? And what do you need from ACA to support you in that process? So I have shared with you my 2 questions, and then we still have the first one up. And even if you don't, even if you don't have any concrete best practices, even if you don't hesitate, even if you wonder if it's a best practice or you're not sure that if it's a best practice, or please just share with us whatever is on your mind. We don't have any answer yet, right, Amanda?
Not yet. I'd
No.
like to encourage people who are who are affiliated with these policies to share some responses. Okay, we have 2 right now.
Okay. That's great.
Yes,
It
over
would
to
be
you.
great. It would be great to understand from what countries, in what countries are these best practices, notions of best practices that you are relating to IP registration, legal protection, IP awareness and registration. That's great. It would be really, really nice to understand in what countries you are talking about. And then I know we are supposed to end the webinar already, and we already would like to answer some questions also about the practicalities around the alliance. So maybe shall we move on then?
Yes, we can move on. And again, this is an ongoing conversation, so it doesn't stop here. You can definitely share what you'd like to see ACA support you with in terms of investment, in terms of trade, in terms of ALCFTA awareness, and so forth. So yes, let's build up on these and be able to create interventions that best work for you. So in the interest of time, I'm so sorry, guys. I know it's already 1 p.m., but this is a very crucial segment for us, and we just wanted to give you some more practical information about ACA. I'd like to invite Rita to come and share this with us, as well as some closing remarks. Over to you, Rita.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Time flies. But I think really in closing, I would say thank you for the interaction. Platforms and dialogues like this help us ensure that we're building in the right direction. We'd love to connect with each of you in your various capacities in the work that you're doing, either as an intermediary or as an enabler within the sector. Please do reach out to us directly and let us know how can we take this forward. We're happy to also engage with the communities that you represent. So whether it means organizing sessions where we're able to speak with the communities or the intermediaries that you represent, etc., within your regions. But on my end, really, it's just to continue to encourage the collaboration, to continue to encourage the building of a Pan-African network that can really ensure that ultimately we're able to advocate and to make the economic case for the sector if we're to start seeing a real shift and real participation. So thank you very much. We'll continue to share updates on where we're at, where we are, and how we can collaborate. I think that's it for me, really.
Thank you so much, Rita. And again, thank you so much to our facilitators for taking the time out of their busy schedules to curate their presentations and their, I would say, it wasn't really a presentation per se, but more their thought-provoking questions. And we just want to appreciate you all for participating as well as for sharing. So we know that this is, there's so much we'd like to unpack. There's so much that we'd like to actually talk about. But in the interest of time, would like to conclude this webinar. And we'll definitely have some more as the year progresses. We are planning on having another engagement webinar in hopefully April. So stay tuned and please visit our website and our social media handles. And feel free to also engage with us in our inboxes. I've left our email addresses in the chat. So in case you need to reach out to either me or Rita or Johanna. Also, I did not introduce one of our other team members. He's called Ivan. He's actually in this webinar. He does all our branding and communications materials. So thank you so much, Ivan, for all that you've done. And yeah, we look forward to engaging with you. And thank you again for your time. Have a great rest of your afternoon and see you soon.
Take care, everyone.